A boy in Gainesville, Florida once had to trade a cherry bomb firework just to get an old guitar. No one imagined that this same boy would go on to create the legendary riff in Hotel California, a song that needs no introduction, whose opening guitar notes alone can make millions stop in their tracks. But it was also this very man who, years later, was fired from the band through a cold, emotionless fax. No farewell, not even a final handshake. And he responded to the world in a way no one expected. He stood up, moved on, and sold a guitar for $2.2 million, just to give it all to charity. Then he lived quietly in a multi-million-dollar mansion in Beverly Hills, drove a vintage Porsche, and performed on yachts reserved for the elite. Don Felder is a man who doesn't need a stage to shine, and doesn't need revenge to become a legend. This is the story of an artist who turned pain into strength and lived a dream life in beautiful silence. If you were born in a house without a piano, without air conditioning, and without hope, would you dare to dream of writing a melody that would one day echo through every bar, stadium, and radio station around the world? Don Felder dared. But the price he paid for that dream is something few could ever imagine. Born on September 21, 1947, Felder was the middle child in a poor working-class family with 5 siblings. He used to joke that his family was so big we had to take turns lining up to use the bathroom. His father was a mechanic, working long hours from sunrise to late night, his hands stained with oil, his back bent by the weight of time. His mother, a quiet but strong woman, sacrificed her youth to raise the children, cooking over a wood fire, washing clothes by hand, and rocking them to sleep by the flickering glow of a kerosene lamp. Felder didn't grow up with expensive toys or a fancy piano. Instead, he grew up with the sound of cicadas in the summer, the whirring of an old ceiling fan, and the static of the only radio in the house. Through that crackling radio, Felder first heard Elvis Presley, and everything changed. In his memoir, Heaven and Hell, Felder recalls the first time he saw Elvis on TV. He thought to himself, "If he can do it, I have to at least try." What started as a flicker quickly became a lifelong fire. But dreams don't come with conditions. While Elvis had a cheap guitar, at least his mother bought him one, Felder didn't even have that. No one helped. No one believed. In Gainesville, nobody thought that skinny boy would amount to anything. But Felder didn't give up. In one rare moment of opportunity, he took a handful of cherry bombs, the only toys a poor kid could afford, and traded them for a beat-up, dusty guitar with rusted strings. It wasn't ideal, but to Felder, it was treasure, and he practiced like his life depended on it. Every night, after the house had gone quiet, he would sit by the window, rewinding and replaying tape recordings from the radio, trying to mimic every note, playing until his fingertips bled. It was in this world of dim light and worn-down frets that he met a young man named Stephen Stills, who also carried a rock and roll dream. They jammed together briefly, but long enough for Felder to realize he wasn't alone. There's a little-known detail Felder once shared. He used to sell his blood just to afford new guitar strings. Physical pain, to him, was nothing compared to the fear of watching his dream die. "Every time I touched that guitar, I felt alive," he said. It wasn't just music, it was survival. So, when you first hear Hotel California, what do you hear? A song? A memory? A dream left unfinished? For Don Felder, it's the sound of thousands of hours playing alone in the dark, of being turned away, of rain leaking through the roof while he kept strumming with swollen fingers. And the journey from Gainesville to the spotlight had only just begun. What would you do if all you had were $10 in your pocket crammed into a basement apartment, chasing a dream the world called foolish. Don Felder didn't just hold on to that dream, he turned it into a melody that would echo in every corner of America. And it was in that moment, in a tiny studio in Los Angeles, strumming the very first notes of Hotel California, that everything changed. When Felder left Gainesville in the early 1970s, he carried little more than an old guitar, a bag of clothes, and a solitary belief that someone with no money, no name, and no connections could still leave a mark on music history. He drifted through New York and Boston, performing late-night gigs with a band called Flow, a group remembered only by its members. Some nights, he had to choose between buying food or guitar strings. He chose the strings. Then, in 1973, his first real break came. Bernie Leadon, a former bandmate from Gainesville and now a member of the Eagles, invited Felder into the studio. It was just one track, but Felder played as if it were his last chance to hold a guitar. The next day, the phone rang. "You ready to join the band?" And just like that, a door opened. Joining the Eagles was a turning point, but it wasn't paradise. Felder had to fight every day to prove he belonged. His Southern blues style clashed with the group's country rock sound. He practiced constantly, backstage, on the tour bus, in hotel rooms. Anywhere there was a moment of silence. He wasn't just playing guitar, he was fighting to stay. And then, in 1976, Felder wrote the demo that changed everything. A slow, haunting riff, echoing like a sunset drive through the California desert. Hotel California was born, and with that iconic opening guitar line, Felder stepped into music history. The song went on to sell over 32 million copies, winning the Grammy for Album of the Year in 1977, and becoming one of the most enduring anthems in American music. Guitar World ranked Felder and Joe Walsh's final solo at number 8 in its list of the 100 greatest guitar solos of all time. But Felder wasn't done yet. In 1979, the Eagles released The Long Run, selling over 8 million copies, and winning another Grammy for Heartache Tonight. By then, Felder was no longer just a guitarist. He had helped reshape the entire sound of the band. At his peak, Felder earned millions of dollars a year from royalties, album sales, and touring. Even just the earnings from Hotel California and their greatest hits, 1971 to 1975, one of the best-selling albums in U.S. history, were enough to secure his financial freedom for life. Compared to Tom Petty, another Gainesville native, Felder was quieter. He wasn't the lead singer, he didn't front the band. But if Tom Petty was a blazing fire, Don Felder was a slow, enduring flame, burning deeper, longer, and without compromise. From a boy who once traded cherry bombs for a beat-up guitar, Felder now stood on stage before tens of thousands, recognized as one of the most influential guitarists of all time. His success was real. But the price he paid? That's another story entirely. From a kid who traded fireworks for music, to a millionaire rocker lighting up stages across the country, Felder's journey was paved with struggle and sacrifice. But now, a new chapter was beginning. One where he no longer had to look at guitars through a shop window, but lived in a Beverly Hills mansion, drove a vintage Porsche, and played under the chandeliers of high-end casinos. But can a mansion and a Porsche erase the scars left by a life full of drama? The next chapter holds the answer. Not everyone who is rich was once poor, but when someone once had to trade a cherry bomb for a worn-out guitar, and later lived in a multi-million-dollar mansion in Beverly Hills, drove a vintage Porsche, and played guitar in the middle of the ocean, that's not just wealth. It's a living testament to the power of belief, talent, and relentless perseverance. the Beverly Hills Mansion, where dreams turn into stone and mortar. Nestled in one of the quietest, most exclusive neighborhoods of Beverly Hills, the mansion Don Felder calls his final nest spans over 4,400 square feet, approximately 408 square meters, and sits on 1.51 acres of manicured land, nearly 6,100 square meters of lush greenery and flower gardens groomed like a private golf course. The home once belonged to singer Seal and supermodel Heidi Klum, a symbol of elite luxury that few even get to step inside, let alone own. Felder completely renovated the property in a distinctly modern California style. High ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows opening onto sweeping green hills, and an infinity pool wrapping around the backyard, where he often plays guitar alone at sunset. In one interview, he shared, "Here, I can hear myself. No crowds, no applause, just the wind and the strings." The property is estimated to be worth between $7 to $8 million. Not just a home, but a statement of how far he's come. The Malibu Beach House, where the ocean inspires. Every note before moving to Beverly Hills, Felder lived in a rented beach house in Malibu, the very place where he composed much of Hotel California. The house stood just steps from the Pacific Ocean. Sea breeze rushed through it day and night. Its glass doors opened onto sunsets ablaze with orange at the edge of the horizon. He once said, "I wrote the Hotel California intro on a cold evening. The sun was setting, and there was nothing with me but the waves and my guitar." Though it was only a rental, monthly costs in that area at the time ranged from $20,000 to $30,000, easily worth millions if owned. Felder no longer has that house, but that space gave birth to one of the most iconic songs in history. The Cars, where every vehicle holds a story. Felder's artistic identity isn't just in where he lives, but in what he drives. Each car a milestone, a gift to mark a phase of growth. Porsche 911 S, the first reward for dreaming big. In the late 1970s, when Hotel California royalties began flowing in, Felder rewarded himself with a Porsche 911 S, a symbol of speed and style. To him, this car wasn't just transportation. It marked the end of nights spent walking home from unpaid gigs. At the time, the Porsche 911 S cost around $20,000, over $100,000 today, and was known as the car that real rock stars drove to make a statement. He often cruised it along Mulholland Drive, the winding, scenic road over the Hollywood Hills, where music and motion met in the haze of sunset. Mercedes-Benz SL 550, where music meets refinement. In his more mature years, Felder chose a different kind of ride. The Mercedes-Benz SL 550 convertible. Elegant, understated. It could go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in under 5 seconds. But for Felder, speed doesn't matter as much as the feeling that you're driving something crafted like classical music. The SL 550 ranges from $120,000 to $140,000, depending on the version. It's not just a car, but a moving sanctuary, where Felder often listens to jazz or classical while leaving the studio. The guitars, 300 instruments, one musical treasury. Some people collect cars, others, watches. But for Don Felder, the world lives within the steel strings stretched over wooden necks. About 300 guitars, in every shape, color, and brand, are lovingly kept in his personal collection. But they're not just instruments. They are musical witnesses, wood and string diaries of a lifetime in music. The white Gibson EDS 1275 double neck. One guitar, two worlds. This iconic double neck guitar appeared in every legendary live performance of Hotel California with the Eagles. When the spotlight hit its pure white body, and Felder played both necks at once, the audience wasn't just hearing music, they were witnessing a ritual. This guitar has become permanently associated with Don Felder's image, and it's one of the most valuable ever auctioned. In 2019, he sold a replica of it. The result? $2.2 million for a single guitar. A staggering figure, yet to music lovers. A fair price for a piece of Hotel California history. His collection also includes vintage 1950s Fender Stratocasters, now worth between $25,000 to $100,000, depending on condition. Classic Gibson Les Paul Customs used in 1970s recording sessions, each valued over $150,000. Numerous custom-made guitars, one-of-a-kind builds not commercially produced, existing only in Felder's private universe. He once said, "Every guitar has a soul. If you play it long enough, you'll hear it tell a story. Sometimes, a story you forgot you lived." This collection isn't displayed in showrooms nor showcased in flashy YouTube videos. But according to a few legendary guitarists lucky enough to visit Felder's private studio, walking through his guitar room is like walking through a living museum. Every guitar has its own story and its own voice. More than material wealth, this is a temple of memory, where Felder keeps the riffs, the lyrics, and the emotions of a life spent in song. And perhaps, on some quiet night in Beverly Hills, he still sits among them, listening to their voices and to his own. A lifestyle of subtle luxury and artistic solitude. When survival is no longer a concern, Felder turned to refined pleasures, not to impress, but to feel fully himself. Rock Legends Cruise, luxury at sea. On cruises like the Rock Legends Cruise, Felder performs out on open waters for VIP fans. Suite tickets run up to $10,000, complete with ocean views, fine wine, and Cuban cigars. The perfect scene for a true rock legend. Golf, meditation with every swing. A passionate golfer, Felder has played at elite courses across California, Arizona, and Florida. "Golf isn't a sport, it's meditation," he once said. "There are no crowds, only wind and stillness, just like the life he now seeks beyond fame. A quiet life, rich in time and peace." At an age when many artists retire or chase spotlights, Don Felder chooses quiet. Powerful, intentional quiet. He doesn't own a private jet, but charters luxury flights for tours. Enough privacy to write mid-air, enough comfort to feel at ease. He no longer rushes from show to show. Instead, he performs at high-end casinos, boutique theaters, and invitation-only cruises, places where he can see every face and play as if in a private conversation with each person. Each morning, he walks his dog with his fiancée around the estate. No bodyguards, no spectacle. Each evening, he sits with his guitar. No recording, no social media. Just music and memory. "I don't need to be everywhere. I just need to be in the right place, where I can be myself." From the Beverly Hills mansion to vintage Porsches, from Malibu sunsets to mid-ocean performances, and a room filled with 300 silent guitars, Don Felder's life is the crystallization of melodies and dreams no one else believed in. But behind the lights, linger fractures, silent scandals, and a cost few ever saw. The next chapter will uncover the unseen darkness behind the legend. Not everyone who creates a masterpiece gets to live forever in its glory. Don Felder, the man behind the iconic guitar parts of Hotel California, was not only the musical architect of the Eagles, but also a witness to one of the most bitter breakups in rock history. A separation from which he walked away in silence, yet with his head held high. It all began on a summer night in 1980, during a charity concert in Long Beach. On stage, the Eagles were performing for thousands of fans, but beneath the music, tension simmered. After being introduced to Senator Alan Cranston, the usually reserved Felder responded simply, "I guess so." Glenn Frey, co-founder of the Eagles, took that as a sign of disrespect. The tension boiled over when Frey yelled into his mic mid-performance, "Only 3 more songs, pal. Then I'll kick your ass." Felder didn't respond. He simply looked at Frey, not with fear, not with avoidance, but with calm in the eye of a storm. The concert ended with applause, but also marked the closing of a chapter for the Eagles. The band broke up shortly afterward. The press would later call it the long night at Long Beach, a night that shattered in the spotlight. 14 years later, it seemed as if all had been forgiven when the Eagles reunited in 1994 for the Hell Freezes Over tour. Don Felder returned to the lineup, a comeback welcomed with cheers from fans. But in 2001, once again, he was dismissed. Not for any musical failure, not for any public conflict, just a fax sent from the band's legal team, informing him that he was fired. Felder recalled being completely blindsided. No phone call, no face-to-face. Behind the decision was a quiet dispute over revenue. While Henley and Frey had privately divided the lion's share of profits from tours and reissues, the remaining members, including Felder, received only a fraction, despite performing and creating together. Refusing to stay silent, Felder filed a lawsuit against Don Henley and Glenn Frey, demanding $50 million, an amount he believed reflected the earnings he rightfully deserved. In the complaint, he stated clearly, he wasn't fired for artistic reasons, but for daring to ask for fairness. The Eagles countersued to block Felder from publishing a memoir. What followed was a legal battle lasting more than 6 years, tense, discreet, and personally costly. Though the final settlement was never publicly disclosed, multiple sources confirm that Felder came out with a financial victory, enough to live comfortably on his own terms. More importantly, he walked away with his dignity intact. He told his side of the story in Heaven and Hell, My Life in the Eagles, published in 2008. Felder didn't hold back. He described the Eagles as a musical heaven, but a hell of control. He detailed tense meetings, decisions made behind closed doors, and the pain of being undervalued, even as the man who helped define the band's signature sound. The book became a bestseller, embraced by thousands of readers, including longtime Eagles fans who never knew what happened behind the curtain. But perhaps what earned Felder the most respect was how he chose silence where it mattered. Though betrayed, he never stooped to bitterness. Not once did he publicly attack Henley or Frey. There was no media circus, no drawn-out scandal. "I let the music speak for me," he once said in an interview. And indeed, Felder didn't fade after the fallout. On the contrary, he launched a fully independent solo career. In 2012, he released Road to Forever, an album that told stories of betrayal, separation, and healing. Critics responded with praise. In 2019, he dropped American Rock and Roll, featuring guest artists like Slash, Joe Satriani, Mick Fleetwood, and Sammy Hagar, proving just how much respect he still commanded in the rock world. He continued performing at major festivals, intimate boutique venues, and kept a steady tour schedule well into his late 70s. Felder didn't need the Eagles to carry on. He had the talent to go the distance under his own name. Scandal may strip away titles, but it can't silence a sound. It can't smother the guitar of Don Felder, and it certainly can't extinguish the passion he's carried since his poor childhood in Gainesville, where he first taught himself to play, using nothing but a radio and cassette tapes. From the ashes of controversy, Don Felder built a new legacy, not only through music, but through grace. And in the next chapter, you'll discover just how powerful that quiet strength truly became. Behind the dazzling lights, behind the solos played millions of times, what remains is how a person lives, and how he uses music to give hope. Don Felder didn't choose the loudest path, but his influence runs deeper than many artists who once stood higher. Felder knows exactly what matters. Perhaps because he grew up in poverty, or because he was pushed aside in the very band he helped build. Or maybe because he learned that true success isn't measured by ticket sales, but by how you make the world better after you step off stage. Felder never launched grand charity campaigns, but he showed up consistently. Backstage at auctions, on the humble stages of nonprofit events, at underfunded schools without enough instruments, places where no cameras were rolling. One of the most moving moments happened in 2019. A Gibson double neck, the same model he used in Hotel California, was put up for auction. The guitar wasn't just an instrument, it was a symbol, a silhouette of a golden era. When it sold for over $2.2 million, the room fell silent. Felder didn't keep the profit for himself. He donated most of it to charitable organizations, including the Boys and Girls Clubs of America, which supports at-risk youth, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and Autism Speaks, a cause he's supported for over a decade. Felder once said, "When you give a child a guitar, you're not just handing them an object, you're giving them a language for survival." Beyond major events, Felder quietly supports schools in Florida and California, personally funding instruments where budgets can't sustain a music class. Once, after a performance, he anonymously sent 10 classical guitars to a local elementary school. No name, no photo op, no demand for thanks. To Felder, it was a small gesture. But to children who had never held a real instrument, it was a gift that could change a future. In 2023, he appeared at the Classic Rock and Roll Party in support of Home Safe, an organization that cares for children who've survived abuse. Felder didn't just play music, he shared his memories, how invisible he once felt growing up in a poor household, and how, as he put it, music saved me. That night, the fundraiser collected $489,000. But to Felder, the value wasn't in the money, it was in the shining eyes of the children being helped. "Every child deserves to believe they matter," he said, "because I was once the kid nobody believed in." Outside of charity, Don Felder's impact continues to ripple through music. His guitar riff in Hotel California, ranked number 8 on Rolling Stone's list of greatest solos of all time, still echoes every night on stages, in bars, and on radios across America. His name was enshrined in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with the Eagles in 1998, despite the conflicts. And to this day, millions try to replicate that riff, every bend, every pause, as if reaching for a piece of music history. At 77, Don Felder is still performing, not for money, not for fame, but because music is where he still belongs. He was cast out of the band he helped shape, but he didn't respond with bitterness or revenge. He chose to move forward, to keep playing, to give, and to leave a legacy greater than any feud. Some people leave behind fortune, others leave behind fame, but Don Felder, he leaves behind something simple and eternal. The belief that even when life turns its back on you, music and kindness can still lead you back into the light. And perhaps that is the most beautiful Hotel California Don Felder ever wrote. Not for the crowd, but for life itself.